નિત્ય રહે છે પ્રભુનો પ્રેમ, સદૈવ નિર્મળ અવિચલ પ્રેમ. નિત્ય રહે છે પ્રભુનો પ્રેમ, સદૈવ નિર્મળ.
Welcome, dear friends, to this net Ignatian Retreat 2020. This retreat at this moment of time has a very special significance because we are in the season of Lent. And for us Christians, the season of Lent is supposed to be a time for personal renewal. I hope and pray that this retreat may help us to prepare ourselves better to experience the joy of the resurrection. I know that all of you have attended a number of retreats, but this retreat is going to be something different. It is an Ignatian retreat. There are different kinds of retreat. One of the most popular forms of retreat is charismatic retreat. But this is going to be a different kind of retreat. Since all of you are making this Ignatian retreat for the first time, let me begin by explaining to you what is the fundamental objective, what is the purpose of the spiritual exercises. By spiritual exercises, what we mean is what St. Ignatius of Loyola had written down. It is basically proposing a method for us to make a retreat. As far as my understanding is concerned, the fundamental objective of the spiritual exercises is union and familiarity with God. This retreat will help us to understand how God is at work in our lives. We believe in God and we have surrendered our life to God. This retreat will help us to understand this God in whom we believe and to whom we have surrendered our lives. Another way of explaining the objective of the spiritual exercises is to grow in devotion. How do we understand devotion? Generally, we equate devotion with certain pious practices that we have. For example, reciting the Holy Rosary, the Way of the Cross, the Divine Mercy Chaplet, and so on. These are all devotions. But when we use the word devotion in the context of the spiritual exercises, it has a different meaning, a special meaning. In the context of the spiritual exercises, devotion would mean certain ease, certain familiarity with God. I'm sure that if you enter into this retreat seriously, if you spend quality time with the Lord in personal prayer at the end of this retreat, you will have grown in your union and familiarity with God. I also believe that this retreat will help you to deepen your relationship with Jesus. To help you understand about growth in spirituality, growth in our relationship with Jesus, let me give you the example of St. Paul. St. Paul, after his conversion, as we read in his letter to the Philippians, St. Paul says, "For me now to live is Christ." But as he continues his journey in discipleship, he begins saying, "In him I live, move, and have my being." There is a quality difference between these two expressions, from saying, "For me to live is Christ," to saying, "In him I live and move and have my being." He has grown in his intimacy with the Lord. He had entered into such mystical relationship with the Lord that towards the end of his life, he is able to say, "In him I live and move and have my being." That is the kind of growth that must happen in our lives, in our journey of life, in terms of our relationship with Jesus. After so many years of spiritual life, perhaps after having made so many retreats in our lives, we need to ask ourselves, how much have I grown in my relationship with Jesus? In other words, my dear friends, we need to move, we need to grow from a superficial relationship with the Lord to a deeper relationship with the Lord. And for this to happen, we have to spend every day some amount of time in personal prayer. These are difficult days, not only for us, but for the entire world. The whole world is affected by coronavirus, and because of which all of us are stuck in our homes. Let us use this opportunity to deepen our relationship with Jesus by spending substantial amount of time in personal prayer. And for that, you must learn to keep your mobile off, to keep away your distractions, so that you can enter into some form of silence. Without some form of silence, it is not possible for us to enter into deep contemplation, into deep prayer. Unfortunately, in this technologically advanced world, we have lost our sense of interior silence. Perhaps this retreat gives us a possibility to rediscover our sense of interior silence. As we begin this retreat, it is good to recall Psalm 46, verse 10, in which God says, "Be still and know that I am God." Be still and know that I am God. This is possible only when we enter into deep interior silence. To help us to understand the importance of silence and what happens in silence, let me cite for us an example from the life of Mother Teresa of Calcutta. Once one journalist asked Mother Teresa of Calcutta, "When you pray, what do you say to God?" And she said, "I don't say anything. I listen." Then the journalist asked, "All right, but what does God say to you?" And Mother Teresa responded, "God doesn't say anything. God listens." And then she added, "If you can't understand that, I can't explain to you either." A wonderful example of someone who had grown in interior silence. And when we enter into interior silence, there is deep and profound communication. Deep and profound communication between your God and yourself. And so, my dear friends, make an effort to enter into some degree of silence during this retreat and during this Lenten season. The second thing that I want to mention to you as we begin this retreat is try to enter into this retreat with some magnanimity and generosity. I use two expressions, magnanimity and generosity. What do we mean by magnanimity? By magnanimity we mean enter with a large heart. enter with an open heart. And secondly, generosity. Be generous to God. Be generous in prayer. Try to spend some time in prayer. To explain to you something more about magnanimity and generosity, let us take two examples. One is the example of Mother Mary. The Gospel of Luke, chapter 1, we have the scene of the Annunciation. And at the end of the scene of the Annunciation, Mary says, "Let it be done to me according to your will." Let it be done to me according to your will. During this retreat, my dear friends, that is the kind of openness that we must try to develop, we must try to cultivate. Let it be done to me according to your will. This retreat will help us to discern, to understand the will of God in our lives, and we shall pray for the courage to fulfill God's will in our day-to-day life. The second example is the example of Zacchaeus, about whom we read the Gospel of Luke, chapter 19. Generally, we speak of Zacchaeus as an example for conversion. It is true that it is an example of a conversion story. But I think in the beginning of this retreat, there is something that we can learn from the life of Zacchaeus. We can see very clearly a few characteristics of Zacchaeus. The first characteristic of Zacchaeus is he had a profound desire to see Jesus, a profound desire to see Jesus face to face. I believe that you have come for this retreat. You have registered your name for this retreat so that you want to have a personal encounter with Jesus. You want to see Jesus face to face. That is so beautiful. But now, Zacchaeus, he had a personal desire to see Jesus face to face. But he realized that there are certain internal and external obstacles in his life because of which he is not able to see Jesus face to face. Certain internal and external obstacles. What were the internal and external obstacles in his life? As far as external obstacle is concerned, there was a huge crowd. And what was the internal obstacle? He was short. So on the one hand, there is a huge crowd, and secondly, he is short. And because of these two obstacles, it wasn't possible for him to have a personal encounter with Jesus. It was not possible for him to see Jesus face to face. But then what happens? Does he allow himself to be overpowered by these obstacles? Does he allow himself to overwhelm him because of these obstacles? No. He takes an important step. He climbs the tree. That was his way of overcoming the internal and external obstacles that were there in his life, due to which he was not able to see Jesus face to face. As we begin this retreat with this profound desire to see Jesus face to face, it is good to ask ourselves, what are the internal and external obstacles in my life which do not allow me to have a personal encounter with Jesus? What are the internal and external obstacles in my life because of which I am not able to deepen my relationship with Jesus? When we talk about external and internal obstacles, we are not talking about distractions in prayer. That is something we shall deal with gradually in the course of this retreat. But when we talk about external and internal obstacles, we mean something different. We have seen this in the life of Zacchaeus. As far as we are concerned, perhaps Some external obstacles could be the kind of relationship that we have, the kind of ambience in which we work, the kind of friendship that we have. Some of them could be perhaps some of the external obstacles because of which we are not able to have or deepen our relationship with Jesus. What about internal obstacles? I think our internal obstacles could be something like lack of forgiveness, not giving God the primary place in our life, and various other forms of sinfulness that may be there in our life. And so, as we begin this retreat, it is important, my dear friends, to identify these internal and external obstacles. And then, like Zacchaeus, we must try to overcome, with the grace of God, these internal and external obstacles that we have in our life, so that we can grow in our intimacy, in our union, in our familiarity with Jesus. Only when we do that, real conversion will happen in our lives. Sometimes we know that in spite of having made a number of retreats, in spite of having participated in number of retreats, the expected conversion, the expected transformation doesn't happen. That is because we have not made the necessary efforts to identify these obstacles and to overcome these obstacles with the grace of God. Having said that, on the first day of our retreat, I want to propose two scriptural passages which may help us to enter into this retreat more meaningfully. The first scriptural passage that I want to bring to your attention is from the book of Revelation, chapter 3, verse 20, in which God says, "Here I am. I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with that person and they with me." During this retreat, my dear friends, the Lord is knocking at the door of our heart. Am I willing to open the door of my heart to the Lord? Am I willing to listen to the voice of God knocking at the door of my heart? Make an attempt, my dear friends, to open your hearts, to open your minds, to enter into silence, so that you can listen to the voice of God and open the doors of your heart. The second scriptural passage that I want to bring to your attention is Mark chapter 10, verse 51. Mark chapter 10, verse 51, in which Jesus asks the blind man, "What do you want me to do for you? What do you want me to do for you?" As you begin this retreat, the Lord is asking you at this moment of your life, in the midst of all these challenges of your life, what do you want me to do for you? We must have the right answer. Don't propose an answer immediately. Take your time. What is that you are expecting from Jesus as you begin this retreat? What do you want me to do for you? In other words, with what expectation are you entering into this retreat? Sometimes we make a retreat because we just feel like making a retreat. But it is important that we have the right expectation. With what expectation am I making this retreat? And once again, on this first day of the retreat, once again, let me remind you about the importance of personal prayer. I know that you are going to make this retreat in your own homes, in your own houses. Decide some time every day, preferably 1 hour. Perhaps you are not used to making 1 hour of prayer continuously, and then you can have it maybe half an hour in the morning, or half an hour in the evening, or whatever time that you think is convenient. But you decide. Don't simply say that I will pray when I can. You decide some specific time, knowing very well your timetable, knowing very well the ambience of your house. Decide the time during which you can make your personal prayer. And when you make your personal prayer, as I mentioned, keep away all the other distractions, including your mobile. One important thing that I must bring to your notice on the first day of the retreat, especially in the context of Ignatian retreat, is something called review of prayer. Review of prayer. This is extremely important. From what I understand, in the mind of St. Ignatius of Loyola, the review is more important than the prayer itself. Now, what is review of prayer? After you finish your prayer, you must sit for a while trying to understand what happened in prayer. You spend half an hour in prayer, what happened? What are the interior movements that we experienced in prayer? These interior movements can be categorized into two: desolation and consolation. What do we mean by consolation? It could be an experience of a sense of joy, a sense of peace, a sense of tranquility, a sense of confirmation, and so on. These are different manifestations of consolation that we may experience in prayer. But don't presume that every time you go to prayer, you will experience only consolation. You will experience only joy. There will also be moments of desolation, moments when you feel very dry, moments when you feel like giving up the retreat, giving up the prayer, and so on. And so become aware of what happened in prayer. This is called review. How did prayer go with you? What really happened? The interior movements within your soul. This is very, very important. And please write down. Very, very important in the context of Ignatian retreat is you must have a diary in which you must write down the points that you have for your prayer. You must write down what happened in prayer in the context of the review and so on. This is extremely important to monitor the process that is happening in the context of the retreat. God is going to lead you in a particular way during this retreat. To understand that, to monitor that, you have to write down things. You may be intelligent, you may think that you can recall everything. That will not work. You have to write down. And therefore, my dear brothers and sisters, keep a diary to make this retreat, this process more meaningful. And so it is a demanding retreat. It is not a retreat in which you will listen to some talks and you may feel good. In fact, in the context of an Ignatian retreat, the preacher has very little significance. He will propose some points for your prayer, for a meditation. But that is not the most important thing. The most important thing is to understand, is to monitor the interior movements, how God is dealing with you in the context of prayer. So, our intellectual knowledge about God, the various points that we may get in the context of the talk, that is not the most important thing. The most important thing is how God is dealing with you. That is the most important thing. And therefore, please don't be lost only in the talk. Of course, you must listen to the talk and get whatever points that may be helpful for your prayer. And I want to conclude, my dear friends, on the first day of this retreat by just giving you a few guidelines for personal prayer. I know that you spend some time in personal prayer, but it is important to follow the following steps to make a personal prayer more meaningful. The first thing that I want to mention as far as your personal prayer is concerned is prepare yourself for prayer. Don't rush into prayer. If you are going to spend half an hour in prayer, at least 10 to 15 minutes, you must prepare for the prayer. Prepare the points that you would like to reflect upon during the retreat. This is very important. And then you come to the prayer. And when you come to the prayer, try to enter into silence. Become aware of the presence of God. And then you must also pray for the grace that you need during this hour of prayer. The expectation with which you are making this prayer. This must be very clear. I feel like praying, so I go to prayer. That is okay. But when you really make a proper prayer, it is important that you pray, you ask the grace that you would like to have from God during this hour of prayer. That is very, very important. And then you go on with your prayer, and at the end of the prayer, you must thank the Lord. Spend a few moments in gratitude. Don't you feel like ending the prayer and then you immediately leave the prayer. That is not the way to proceed. Spend a few moments in gratitude. Whether you experience consolation or desolation, it does not matter. Half an hour you tried to spend with the Lord, and for whatever that happened in prayer, spend some time thanking the Lord. And that is how you must make your personal prayer. And so, my dear friends, I wish you all the best as you enter into this process of the retreat. I pray that this retreat may help you to deepen your relationship with God. I pray that this retreat may help you to grow from a superficial relationship with Jesus to a deeper relationship with Jesus. Have a wonderful holiday with Jesus during this retreat. Thank you.